Yesterday's conversation was pretty awesome.
Yeah, yesterday we had
I'd say it was really good.
a lot of the women in this community having an open table discussion of what's it like being in a high tech industry.
Yeah, that was that was eye opening because the women were honest. They
It was
they
a
had
kind of like, tell
some
us what
stories
we
to
need to
share.
do to make
Yeah,
things better.
yeah, yeah. That's really my angle on it. I mean, I'm not the voice of every guy, and I definitely think more immersion and inclusion than probably most. But it's kind of interesting to see that from a male perspective, as Dan said yesterday, it's kind of it's kind of made for us. I mean, it's just the nature of the relevance of the world we live in. But can that change? And it looks like it is, but I think it's still going to take a long time to get where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
But the
how do
win,
we do that in a way that makes
yeah, I don't know.
sense without
Well,
making things worse,
mm,
right?
Yeah,
I can
It's
that
just
and that and that's a huge topic, and it's going to take years. But
Mm.
to start, we should
Yeah.
listen more. They need, and I'm saying that speaking from that's a huge topic. That's a topic for another day, so I won't go down that path. But I like what you said, Ed. It's we have to accept the fact that we're ignorant,
right,
and
right.
ignorant is not
No,
a bad word,
you
and we
you
should
make a
be more empathetic and listen because we we, we intimidate for number one, and we don't even
right.
realize we intimidate. We should be more open
Well,
in that and invite them.
the inclusion and immersion I speak of, Joe, isn't just it's not just women, it's Asians, it's blacks, it's
That's
minorities as a whole.
totally
And
agree.
I was never
Yep.
raised with, oh, because he's a black man, he doesn't count. I was always, if your voice counts, you listen to that person. He might have or she might have a valid point. That's the
Yes.
way I was raised. So where does that start? It starts at home. But we can't always send that message back at home. So how do we do that? We're doing it at the workplace, doing immersion and inclusion at the workplace. I get it. Got to start somewhere. But a lot of that starts at home, man.
It,
That's not the way I was raised.
yeah, and that's perfect. And I have people. A, a, a lot of this got flared up, as you all know, or 2 years ago, the George Floyd thing. But what came of that is people got started opening up their eyes and seeing things, and um, had a lot of questions about how can I help, what can I do, right? And I never knew that was happening. I'm thinking it happens every day. You just don't see it. I live with it. I haven't lived it all of my life. Well, how do you put up with that? Well, I don't have a choice, right? Because I'm black.
put down.
So at the end of the day, how can I help? You can help by when you're not that way. I applaud you for doing that. I applaud you for always accepting me for who I am. But when you hear some of your surrounding and your friends bashing a female or bashing a child or
Yeah, say
whoever,
something.
you should
Yeah,
say something. Not because
yeah,
you're not saying nothing, you're part of the problem.
Mm.
right.
And you learn how to address that. Just come step back and say, well, what made you say that? Just a casual conversation. And you can, that's a huge way to start helping. And we have to bridge that gap. It's,
Hmm.
it's, I'm going to say this now, I'm going to kind of leave this alone so we don't go off one at tangent. But for me, for example, um, it's like if you look at what took place 63 years ago compared to what took place, not a couple of months ago, I look at a picture and it's like, what really changed? A lot has changed, but a lot has still the same.
Yes.
And
We,
that's what the females, the Asian, it's like they get up and they have to kind of plan. Every day when I leave the house, I have to plan every move I make because it could be deadly. And that's deep, but again, it's a discussion for another day. But this is what females are encountering that because we don't allow it. We're blocking them, don't even know it.
That's one thing that was kind of brought up was um, we may think that we are making a difference or we're trying, but actually we're doing it in a way that isn't constructive.
Right.
It isn't helping. It's you know it's about the perspective, and that was one of the conversations we had. Maybe I've had a similar experience of being treated unequally or underestimated.
You, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks,
Dan.
But that may not mean that, you know, someone else felt exactly the same way. That person, you know, it's about that perspective and understanding that it's not exactly the same.
Well, we learn from a perspective, though.
Yes.
That's the key. We learn, we listen, we learn. People don't take time to listen. People don't take time to understand, because I go back to where they were raised, how they were brought up. So to deprogram or reprogram that person to think, wait a minute, these people do have a voice, and it's a valid one. That's a hard way to program people, or to get them to think of inclusion and immersion, rather than that, you know, he's a black man, what does he know? She's a woman, who cares? Because that's how a lot of people are. And I would love to see that day when people don't think like that. I'd love to see the day when, hey, no, bring him in a conversation. Every good idea is never a bad idea.
Correct.
And I don't know how close we are to that, but I think we're a lot better off than when we were, like Joe said, 60 years ago.
The human experience is one of constant learning, but it's painfully slow, because I think when you become enlightened on a particular topic, you know, you're just, then you have that feeling of like waiting for everyone to catch up, and you can't really accelerate that as an individual across a society. You know, it's a very difficult challenge. It is generational. I agree with what you said, Ed, about starting in the home, you know, and as a father, you know, I'm glad to see, you know, like the results in my kids. My oldest is an adult now. You know, it's neat to see that change happening, but it's just painfully slow, based on the fact that tribalism is so prevalent in our society.
Yeah.
People love to argue, and I think the social media has become a great tool for good, but you know, obviously it brings up all the bad too. It just amplifies everything. And so we're going through a growing pains period of time right now, I think, with social media, and I think we're going to see things improve.
Right.
But it's hard to watch sometimes in the process.
In
that's like
in South Africa, I'll let you go, Ed.
Good.
In South Africa, there's still a huge divide between black and white. I mean, apartheid is still, you know, within my lifetime kind of thing. So there's always still that big divide, and kind of like looking back at a lot of my family and just seeing that the way that they talk about black people, and especially now moving to the UK and being away for that for almost 8 years and now going back, you know, I just kind of like, I wasn't happy with it, but I just let it happen. But now it's kind of like, whenever I hear them saying things like that, I call them out on it now. Just be like, stop that. You can't do that anymore. And you know, they're still in that generation where that was okay, and you know, it makes me feel uncomfortable when they kind of do that, and I just kind of move away.
Even the negative generational, the transfer of bigotry from generation to generation has less power now because of social media, because kids have a chance to see, you know, hey, my dad makes these comments, you know, he's clearly a racist. I don't want to be like that. Where, you know, 50 years ago or so, you know, they may not have seen their whole society if they were in a small town or in a closed environment socially. They may not have had experience or exposure to other points of view.
Yeah.
So I think there's, like I said, I think overall we're on the right path, but it's just going to be painful and slow.
Like when I moved into the area, one of my family's members just searched what is the demographic of the area, and they're like, oh, it's this many whites and that. And I said to them, why does it matter?
Yeah, exactly. Why does it matter?
Who cares?
Why does it matter?
Yeah. What's the crime statistic? Okay, that's fair. But
to Kirby's point earlier was we we can't do the fast track with this. We do the fast track, we're going to regress. Is that the proper word? We'll regress. We need to keep moving forward as a generation,
I think
as a community.
That's what's caused a lot of the hate in South Africa, is that
Yeah.
they're trying to fast track it.
Yeah, you can't. You have to. You need people at the top, whether it's government, social environment, whatever, to make sure they're pushing downstream that you need to listen, you need to understand, you need to know that we're a whole. Just remove the color and the skin and the gender out of it. I mean, everyone has a voice, everyone has a meaning, and I still go back to the home light. That's kind of where it all starts. But to Josh's point,
Thank you for joining us, Will.
here's you,
Get
Will.
back to your toes.
Thanks, Will.
Hi guys. See you,
Cheers.
Will.
Get back to them toes. They don't make themselves.
To Josh's point, you have to step up. Somebody in a family say, I don't like being around him. Why? Because it's always racial comments. I don't need to listen to that. And you step away from it, because that person is going to, platoon themselves eventually. If you get a mass people, just understand that that's not acceptable. Eventually that voice dies. That voice of the discrimination dies.
Yep.
I mean, you can't always just step away from it. There has to be a point where you've got to call it out.
Yeah. Power in numbers, man. Power in numbers.
I think it's also a bit of morality. And people are either a moral person or they're not. And so there's the saying that goes around is you can't legislate morality, right? I don't think you can change the morals of people either. They're either a bad person or they're a good person. So it's just, me personally, I tend to not hang around bad people. So, and they kind of find their own negative path in the world and end up down at the bottom, and eventually they figure it out for themselves. So,
Yep. Agreed. Totally agreed.
So
Rachel, hold on a second. Rachel, you've been very quiet. You are a female on this podcast. We're giving you an opportunity to say something if you want. So
I'm glad
please
you said
do.
that, Ed. I was going to ask her. I want you to chime in, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've never had any issues, ever.
because it's what you wanted to do, right? This is what the path that
Yeah.
you chose. So I think
Yep.
that's another thing to be cautious of as well is projecting these things onto people and not forcing them, but telling them this is what you want to do. Because in a way, aren't you?
Yes,
you're
that
kinda
bothers
really-
me a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're really kind of doing the same thing, but in reverse. Telling women like, oh, you should be in the kitchen and stay at home. And now we're saying, oh, no, you should be an engineer. It's like, well, why don't you just, what do you want to do? Okay, this is what I
Yes.
want to do. Okay, then here,
Yeah.
let me help you do that. And
Oh,
let
yeah,
them choose their own path.
That whole
Yeah.
narrative gets on my nerves. I think anyone should do what they want to do. I mean, sure, it's great to have an effort to say, hey, let's get more people to do this one thing. That's so cool, right? But only if they want to do it.
Well,
If they
you
don't want to, don't make them.
you reduce barriers. You don't push people into a corral and pigeonhole
Yeah,
them.
close-
That's just
close
the
the
same
gate.
problem, right?
Yeah.
Say
And then they'll
go.
end up presenting it,
Yes.
and then
But
you made the problem worse.
but you
think
got to
that-
take the barriers down so that
Yeah.
people do have that freedom to choose their own path.
And I think we have those things that are called labor laws here in the United States. I mean, when I interview people and stuff like that, on the application, you don't even see all that stuff. I mean, my team is, I guess it's diverse,
Hey, Matthew.
but it's
Matt.
more importantly to me, it's full of capable people.
Yeah,
So-
I actually, Rachel brought up a
Mhm.
very good point. And I'm trying to hold back here because, so one of the things you said.
You're more than welcome to let loose.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
You'll always be welcome, no matter what.
So,
Joe the legend. Joe the legend Lance.
okay. So the interesting thing I'm hearing from you is that I have nieces and a nephew. Without getting into your age, you're the next generation, and the beauty of that, it's a double-edged sword. I say that is because your next generation, you don't know a lot of the, not that you don't know the history, but you don't bring it in. This generation that's coming up now, they kind of just do things and not even think about it. My generation, there's too much, and this is where the ignorance come into play and the stuff that's embedded in the head. part of my problem is that I grew up during that time of all this was going on. So it's in my storage bank. So there's three things that normally Black people teach their kids. It's the look, the talk, and be aware. And every family would have that talk with the kids is that be aware of that. That's being kind of phased out to a sense. So we try not to embed that in their head, to let them think freely and not have to deal with that. But there's some things you have to be aware of. And I think with you and your generation, you're very aggressive, and I think that's good. Unfortunately, what's happening today is that a lot of the roadblock and a lot of the corporate companies, and they're being pushed, and I won't call any name of companies out, but a lot of the executives in place are white males, and they don't even realize how ignorant they are. And that came to light a couple of years ago. These companies stepped back and brought in some Blacks to have the conversation, that uncomfortable conversation. And I was a part of that discussion with a few companies, and oh my God, they had no idea. The one thing they all advertise, we want you to come to the office being your authentic self. Looked at them, a few of us looked at them, it's like, we can't do that. And they're like, well, what do you mean? You don't understand. You have to be educated first and understand. You're not gonna, and so it's a lot. It's gonna change over the generation. It's gonna take to get the old guys like myself out of the picture. And then the next generation, like what Ed was saying, in the household, the family, bring them up. Kids are not born with having that problem. You put two kids together, it doesn't matter what they are. They're gonna run and go play to each other. So it's being taught. You don't born with that racism of all that problem. It's being
It
taught.
is upbringing.
Yeah. So
Totally.
you're phasing out that generation slowly, and it's taking too long. You can't expedite that. It's going to have to grow into it, but we can help by trying to have the, like we said before, having a conversation with someone that's speaking that way. And some of them you can't talk to, just let them go their own way.
No, ignorance is blind. I mean, there's no way you can change that. So
correct.
Well, Joe, to what I think we have incredible reach with. It's a tough one to find words for. Bear with me. Our user groups, our user group leaders have a huge amount of influence of setting the tone, the culture for people that come into our ecosystem here. Setting a place for inclusion of all walks of life, all degrees. Like something that Eric Beatty did really well when I was brought into the Seattle group. I'm sure it's something you do well too, Joe, and making sure as we add new user group communities or like the Champions program, that is the tone that's set, that is welcoming, accepting, that we learn about each other.
Yeah, it's like
so
I was going to say,
can.
Toby's in the chat and he's saying if you witness a social injustice happening, like a policy that endorses segregation, you should be willing to take a stand against such a policy.
Right.
That kind of falls in line with my power of numbers comment. The more to speak up against it, the quicker that will go away, or at least be reviewed from a corporate sense anyways.
So, I mean, so the thing that the ignorance of me over the past couple of years, it's going to sound really bad, but bear with me. I learned how ignorant I was of not knowing how ignorant you were. And I think
that makes sense. No, that makes total sense, Joe. That makes total sense.
Yeah. So in order to move forward, and this is not for everyone can't do this, but my thing to you is that how many times have each of you on this call have you, I'm sure all of you have either Black friends or Chinese friends or someone of a different race. How many times have you had that uncomfortable conversation with them? We don't talk about that. We never do. We'll ask, hey, how you doing? It's all good. Your fist bump, we move on. Hey, how's that car? We never, and ignorance why would you? No one really want to hear that.
Hmm.
But if you were to talk to that person that you're friends with of a different race or whatever, you find out that person is struggling with something that you never knew, and you could help with that. But no one ever goes there.
I
And
think everybody.
until
yeah,
we're willing to go there, it's
I
gonna be
did-
up.
I think everybody struggles with something at some point in their life, and
Absolutely.
it's not always easy to reach out to people.
It's-
I mean,
it's
look
not.
at the suicide rates over the last couple of years, right? Skyrocketing, and it's I don't know. It's to me, it's like when you say when you think about your Asian friends or your black friends. I maybe I'm naive, but I just have friends. I don't really like my team. Like I said, I when I think about it, I guess it's pretty diverse, but they're just people to me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm naive in that sense. To me, I'm very libertarian when it comes to stuff. Is that let people do what they're going to do, and as long as they're not hurting anybody, it's their thing. I mean, if they are hurting somebody, then it's different to me. But I think like at Dassault, they've done a really good job of I guess I hate to use the word inclusion because it just sounds so cheesy because it's I think most of us hire people because of their abilities. I know like in tech support, it's the same thing. That's such a diverse group, but they're so talented and it doesn't matter who they are, what they are. So, but I think they've done a good job in with the, making feel people included. I mean, I'm a member of the Pride Committee at work. And it was, I think we started last year and, but we see things on the other side too, like that, sometimes the people who are supposed to be the most inclusive tend to be the most exclusive. I mean, that's my experience here locally with the charity that I used to work with, and stuff. So I think it goes all ways. I think it's, again, you're either a good person or you're a bad person, and you attract those kind of people. If you're hanging out with somebody that's a bad person, then your choice in friends might be questionable as well. Eventually they're going to die on the vine by themselves.
Yep. But Mike, most companies don't have that, and I know you don't like the word inclusion, neither do I, but some companies don't have that even in their repertoire. Inclusion's not part of it. So
yeah.
and companies
Right.
like that, so yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I did 2 years as a contract employee at Dassault. Yeah, there is a broad reach of everybody and anyone,
Yeah.
and it's based on your ability, not based on anything else. I totally agree with that comment.
And I
But
can
there
speak
are-
to that
I think
directly, having just onboarded 3 weeks ago, coming from heavy industry, manufacturing, foundries, welders, right? The HR was the railroad tracks behind the plant. So coming from that for a decade to Dassault, night and day. And the only diversity I can claim to is just coming from the arts world, primarily with my music degree. It just shifted my brain a different way than most engineers, the way I see problems and whatnot. And up until this job, that was not an asset. I didn't fit the mold, and that was very clear. But the team here has embraced it from my first interview. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was I came from the mold world, building plastic injection molds, very manly type of thing, right? And stuff. And they don't, I mean, there's jokes that I used to hear and stuff that would, turn any kind of gay person off like that. But yeah, Dassault, joining the Pride Committee, and then our first meeting that we had when people talking about coming out and stuff like that, I never really expected anybody to say anything different than they really did, or it to be a big deal. It's like, okay, I decided to wear black jeans today instead of blue jeans. It's just, nobody really has a different reaction because of the color jeans, right? So, but again, it's like going back to what Ed was saying is like in the mold industry, I knew I was never going to get what I wanted out of it. I was not going to get retirement. I wasn't going to get to work with the kind of people that I wanted. So I decided to change my path in life to get out of that and get into something where I could. So again, that's because I chose to do it. There wasn't a government program that came along. There wasn't like a special program from SolidWorks that was hiring diverse people. It's just, I decided to better myself and get to where I wanted to go. So, so I don't know. I'm just, it's crazy things. It's like, I kind of feel like this is like on a first date, you don't talk about politics or religion, right? And it's
The full moon.
gone
I
down that
dropped
road.
in here thinking, man, I got into the good stuff
Yeah,
right away.
but this is healthy conversation, and it's healthy
is, but-
conversation amongst a group of people that are very intelligent, and we can be the messengers of this conversation to say, hey,
Totally.
look, come on, we can be those people.
And
And
I think
have
as corporations or as leaders in an organization or if you don't make a point to be inclusive and whatever word you want to choose, but that inclusivity, advertising that is important, because I think the default is exclusionary. And so you have to take a stand and make sure that we have a policy of being welcoming and open-minded.
Yeah. See, for me, when I went searching for jobs and looked at SolidWorks,
Hey, nice shirt, Kirby.
yeah, I didn't apply because they were saying, "Hey, we hire gay people." I just thought it'd be a cool job, so I applied.
Right.
That was it. So I don't know. It's you gotta be careful. Yeah.
But you didn't feel included in your past job, right?
No, and I also didn't. I also knew I wasn't going to get the retirement I wanted or the health care I wanted, and so it wasn't their fault that they weren't offering what I wanted. They were offering what they had to, and that's it. If I thought they should have offered more, then I should save up money and buy the company and change it or go somewhere else. It's not. It wasn't on them to make my life comfortable. It's just a job. That's kind of how I looked at it. But that's why I joined here, and we're going to solve it. Change. It wasn't just a job; it was a career at that point.
Josh,
You make the
follow up your. Go ahead, Ed. Sorry.
no, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
If I could follow up your point, Josh, it takes intention to shape these cultural. I don't want to call them issues. That's not the right word, but it'll be a stand-in. People that are just obnoxious about being change advocates. The arts and nonprofit world that I dabbled in before this job got it. Big time manufacturing, heavy industry did not, unless they hired someone that hopefully didn't get squashed and fired for doing it, even though they hired them to do it. It's tough. It takes a long-term vision with some really determined people to pursue these goals.
Yeah, I think, and then I think the experience can go the other way too. When I moved here to Vegas, I was volunteering at the Gay and Lesbian Center here, and I went through 1 year of volunteering there and going through their, the different events they had, and that was enough for me. They were the most exclusive people that I'd ever met in my life, and they claim to be the most inclusive, but behind the scenes, it's if you don't fit the mold, if you, you're not included. And again, it's like it's common in other things. It's like, in the Pride Committee at work, they were talking about bringing in like different organizations for speakers and stuff. And so I brought up the fact, does it matter if this organization that tends to be, pro-gay and all this other stuff, if they're supporting companies that do business in countries where they kill people, does that matter? Right. So it's a lot of it, like, I think like Matthew, you're kind of leading to, it's virtue signaling in a way. I think a lot of companies do that to, to try and, get up, I guess.
The box has been checked.
The shirts that we are wearing, Ryan, or whose shirt?
And so I think it's.
But if you're doing that though, and you're doing it disingenuously, I think in this society in particular, you're going to get called out when you go against that principle. If you're stating one thing and doing another.
If the voices are loud enough against them, though, right? I mean, I think we saw a lot of virtue signaling over the last couple of years, or last few years. So, it is what it is. I think it's so. I like good people, and that's why I choose to hang out with me.
Joe, if I can ask you, Joe, can you describe your experience of when you've encountered people or organizations that were genuinely inclusive or not, or what that felt or looked like? How do you tell the difference?
Well, so
this has turned into Larry King. Sorry.
No.
This is a healthy conversation and awareness.
I can even lean forward and put some suspenders.
Yeah, I hear you. Right, put your glasses on there. So, unfortunately, Mike Puckett's bringing up a lot of interesting points and a lot of good points. However, there's a lot of things that's already in place. A lot of policies. I'll use this as an example. A lot of companies have policies in place that don't even know that it's causing problems and it's avoiding me from being my authentic self. Let me say that first. And until they understand the female, or any colored person. I want to generate, it's not just for blacks or female, right? But until you really understand and you look at that and you understand the other side, it's like a left-handed person from a right-handed person, right? All of your stock is for a right-handed person. You hire a left-handed person, and that person have to adjust to using a mouse that's
Ryan, if you want to join in on the conversation yourself, let me know and I'll send you a link.
That's a simple scenario, but that goes up, way up, right? Let me use this as an example, which has been broadcast all over the world here for the past couple of years. But example, you have a black female that's at the front desk, an admin in the admin office. So the first person you see is this black female, and her hair is very nicely pressed and done well. And then every so often that person has to not put chemicals in her hair, so she lets her hair go natural. The executive comes in and goes to the HR person like, who's that at the desk? Like, what do you mean who's at the desk? It's the same person at the desk forever. It is. Now her hair is natural. It's like, we can't have that. That's not good representation. Not realizing that understand the ethnic background of this person, that they can't afford to even do that. Number one is the cost, and one is it's chemical burnt here. So at some point they have to do that. And typically what they do is put on a wig to fit in. So being my authentic self, and I say that and I use that as an example, but you can pick anything. I can give you an example. And those are some of the things that, how would you, it's ignorance, again, to come back to ignorance. You don't know, and policies are in place that's handicapping so many people.
It's also highly illegal too. I mean, that's
Well,
what I'm getting at. So,
and I'm not even getting into that, what's legal and what's not.
well, I mean, that's the point of it. Though. Again, you can't legislate morality, right?
Or common
so,
sense.
like, trust me, if I get demoted or I don't get a promotion or something, that's all because of something that's this or that. Trust me, the first call I'm making is to a lawyer to say, okay, we're going to rename this to MikeWorks instead of SolidWorks. And I'm going to own the whole company, right? I mean, that's how it is. It's, I'm not worried about stuff like that. I mean, it's just, you can't let people get away with breaking the law. That's the thing. And we have plenty of laws that back all this stuff up.
If I can just interrupt you there a second, that's part of the problem. Like, it's again, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but things have changed a lot, but not so much. It's not blatant anymore. It's just handled higher level and behind the scenes. And things are still, actually it's more dangerous now than it was before because it's not open and you don't know who it is. Again, it's that generation of getting the older guy like myself out and let the next generation in. So it's not so simple about, I contact my lawyer and I go there because it doesn't work that way. Should, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's inherent problems that are beyond. I don't know. It's
out of control.
Yeah, I mean, companies when do they listen is when their bottom line is hurt, right?
So that's exactly right. When most companies started to listen and started to put changes in place was 2 years ago. All of the corporate companies were being told that you will do this, and then they got pushed back and said, we're not going to do it. And they were told they didn't have to do it. So now they're on the fence about which way to go with that. Do the right thing, right?
Well, it's like it's just like the highway that has the bad turn, right? There should have been a barrier there at the corner in case a car goes off the side of the road or a truck comes off the other way. Until someone dies, then no changes ever happen.
And they may have a secret number of how many people need to die.
It is a
number. I mean,
not just one. There could be.
I mean, how long did cars have seatbelts or airbags?
Right. They aren't allowed to make a change or put up a stoplight to the intersection until
Thanks for joining us, Josh.
have died.
Sorry,
and that's the truth.
Thank you for joining us, Josh.
Yeah,
Thanks,
cheers,
Josh.
everyone.
Cheers.
Have a good hanging with you all this week.
I got one more meeting at the bottom of the hour in about 2 minutes, so I got to jump off for that as well. So.
Hey, I appreciate it, Mike. Good conversation.
Yeah, we'll see you guys. I'll see you guys next year. And fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed.
That the
Decepticon in person. In person.
We're gonna have this we can all hang out in the real hallways.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy, guys.
All right, Mike.
Cheers.
Hey, thanks, a lot.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers.
The beautiful thing about what we're talking about here is that we haven't made any alienations against Australians yet. So, Mike Lord, you're good. You're good, Mike. You're welcome wherever you want to go.
Hey, we hear
Wait till
you,
he
mate.
unmutes and then go for it. Yeah.
I just
Sorry,
wanted to
Mike.
bring, I wanted to levity the conversation. It's
Yeah.
been deep. It's been deep.
It's
just get a
needed.
little humor
Yeah.
in there. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
get humor.
Joe and I have had these conversations, and
Yeah, we have.
I have plenty of thoughts on the matter. I just find it incredible in this day and age that we're actually still talking about it. And it's no different here in Australia. To the point we've just had an inquiry into our parliamentarians because it took a staff member to be raped in our Parliament House to raise the conversation. And if you want to see, I'll try and grab some links. If you want to see some young women fighting our Parliament at the moment, a young woman who was Australian of the Year last year, Grace Tane, who is just constantly giving it to our Prime Minister at the moment over his actions. It's a conversation to look at. But this is just a crazy conversation that continues in this day and age, whether it be colour, whether it be race, whether it be religion, whether it be women in the workplace.
Mhm.
But the best thing I'd love to see that we didn't need to legislate it, and more importantly, we didn't need to discuss about it because it wasn't a point to discuss. It didn't need to be raised.
We haven't even touched religion yet.
I
Oh
know.
man.
And this conversation needs to happen with a rather large glass of scotch next time in a rather
Large.
seedy bar.
Properly lubricated
Many.
conversation. Yeah.
I mean,
I've got to go in just a minute, guys, but I do want to jump in because first, thanks, Joe, for talking. That's great. I grew up in a really mixed neighborhood, so I know exactly where you're coming from. And Rachel, youth, I've got a son who's coming out of high school. He's going into college. He's going into poli-sci. He wants to make things great for the world. So we've had lots of conversations with him. And but I would say, words matter. I always take forever when I write things because words are so important. And I think let me challenge you guys when you're talking about inclusion or exclusion, think about validation. People, when you think about people and what they do and who they are and what they're seeking, most people are seeking validation. They want some confirmation that they've got good ideas, that they're a good person, that they're working hard and they're doing the right stuff. And so it's not so much grouping people together, which it's difficult not to do, and it's easy to fall into that. But just try and keep everyone as an individual and validate them as an individual. So, I mean, when I was a team leader, I hired a gentleman that had hearing problems. He was deaf, and some of the other managers, they were asking me, well, how's he going to be able to do this? And how's he going to do that? And I said, he can do it. We will accommodate. We'll do whatever we need to do. And, we had one of those, I don't know if you guys have seen the phones that do phone to text. And so,
Yeah.
He told me, I was unaware of them. He told me about it. He informed me and educated me about it. There was no cost to the company. And I said, let's get it in here. I worked with our IT folks. I said, you're a designer, you're a draftsman, you need to communicate with customers. So if that's what we need for you to do that, we'll do it. And so, I mean, it's just validating people and, what they need to be successful, helping them to be successful. When we set up the team office, I set up the desks so that it was easy for people to look face to face at each other because he read lips. He didn't want to sign, but he could read lips. And with his hearing implants, he could hear with lip reading and communicate very well. So,
That's awesome.
I try not to think about being inclusive and everything, but just try to, everyone is an individual and just what validation do they need and what are they trying to accomplish? So I don't know
Well
what
said.
that adds, but
No,
Yeah.
that's well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Seconded.
Well said, Dan.
Hey, that's great, Dan. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to continue this conversation in Nashville with you guys. And I'll tell you, it's by validating people. I mean, the reason this conversation is going on so well, we're friends. We've talked before. We trust each other. It's a matter
Yes.
of trust.
Yep.
Too. I mean,
Yep.
I know,
Yeah, we all know
And-
each other. We all have that same level of trust. So,
I
yeah.
mean, Ed and I have been up many late nights at Solid
Oh, yeah.
World talking, Joe and
Oh, yeah.
Michael.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. But great to see everyone. And I've got to go. Dinner's going to be ready. So thank you all.
Same
See you,
here.
Dan.
Hey,
Thanks,
Johnny.
Dan.
Thanks,
That's a
Dan.
great note to end on for me
Yep.
too. And Johnny, Kirby, thank you for giving this this platform for us to just come and,
Yeah, it's
and form our own little community. It's been awesome, man.
we're more than happy to let you guys lead the conversation.
Yeah.
While we sit back. I mean, Joe, I think you were part of the inclusion session that was, I think, yesterday.
Yes, it was.
So, just a quick question: how does that, being an official session compared to just a natural conversation like this one has been?
I think this gives, in that meeting yesterday, the panel was doing most of the talking I think this setting is much open. I considered stuff like what we're doing now for unofficially is a safe space, right?
Yeah.
We know each other, so we feel comfortable that we can say things. And what I would like to say is that everyone should be able to speak openly and not be offended what someone said, because if you can't ask the question and say what's really on your mind, then we're defeating the purpose. If I ask her a question, she shouldn't have to ponder in her head, how do I phrase this without offending someone? And until we can speak openly and express ourselves the way we want to and not try to ease the blow, we're not going to move forward.
Yes.
That's what needs to happen. And if we can, so to answer your question, this is more open. Well, the session we have was more structured. Understand why there's a limited time there, but it was too structured, and we didn't get a lot of conversation from the audience.
Because I mean, this was completely unexpected.
Yeah, no,
it
it's
just
natural,
naturally went that way, and we're really glad that we
And
have
I'm
the
sorry for that. I
space.
didn't mean to totally.
No,
You're
it's
all
perfect.
good, Joe. All good.
And we're glad
Yeah.
that it went into this naturally, and we had a whole conversation about it. We want to kind of snip this all together and make it a single video and actually allow it for people to go back.
Mhm.
But we did a live session as well, and there wasn't that much interaction, and I just wanted to see if you kind of felt the same way, where when you put a time limit on a conversation like this, you feel like you can't cover all the points that you want, and you can't fully gather the perspective of the audience.
Yep.
You can't
Well,
gather.
when
you can't gather
when
the
you're under
perspective. Yeah, go for it.
when you're under a time constraint too, you feel like you have to be rushed,
Yes.
right? And everyone has a chance to speak, but when you're going to get that chance to speak, everyone has a valid point. So this dialogue, this medium that you gave us, there's no when you end the podcast, that's when it's done. Have you told us when you're going to end it?
No.
We
No.
end when everyone
There's no finite resources to
Right.
fight over
We'll
with
end.
time.
Right.
We leave when we're the
It is
last
what it
ones
is.
left.
We leave
Oh, we run out of alcohol.
when there's no one here and the bourbon is dry. You guys are done.
We got beer as
So-
well.
Oh, we got beers. Yeah,
I see Eric's here
you got a
too,
good
so that's
time.
going to be a good handoff. I got to go, guys.
Thanks,
Joe,
Matt.
thank you for your
See you,
thoughts. That
Matthew.
was
Oh,
awesome.
hey.
We'll have a
Matt.
conversation next
Yeah,
week, Matt.
yeah.
Now talk about two
Up again,
oldies
Matt.
but goodies right here. Casey Gorman and Eric Beattie. Holy shit.
I know, right?